Hi, welcome back to part 2 of our elastic adventure on the serger. In the previous tip clip, I showed you how to attach elastic using the elastic foot. And today I want to demonstrate the quartering method that you might be familiar with already on your sewing machine. And it basically is the same method on the serger. So let's get started. I often get asked about this in workshops, so I thought it'd be worth incorporating into this little tip clip. So if this is our little waistband, don't I wish I had a waist this tiny? I've got my seam here, and you're just going to divide the waistband into quarters. So I use that as my first mark. I've put a mark at the halfway point on the other side, just like you do with your sewing machine. And you've probably done this a million times. And then you mark the other 2 quarters. So now you've got the 4 marks. I did this with ballpoint pen, which obviously you wouldn't be doing on your garment, but for the camera it works well. And then you've determined the length of your elastic, and there's no hard and fast rule on how much smaller your elastic should be than your fabric circumference. It's whatever's comfortable for you and what will hold up that waistband securely. So you can determine that. But one thing I like to do is where I've joined the elastic, rather than put that bulk into right along the seam, I place that at one of the other marks because it doesn't really matter. It's already been measured out. And I put my quarter marks on that as well. So I folded it, marked my halfway point, again, matched those up, and I've gotten my quarter marks. So I just take that, and I might put this one right at this mark, and I'm going to align the edge of the elastic with the raw edge of the fabric. And because I don't have to worry about inconsistent amounts of gathering with this, because it's going to be distributed equally between those quarter marks, I don't need to use my elastic foot. So I'm just doing this, and again, it's probably the exact same technique that you've used for your elastic insertion on your sewing machine, but this gives you a nice finished edge. So I'm just going to go around, attach these right at the marks, and then we'll go to the serger. And one nice thing about attaching elastic with your serger is that the elastic can't twist and flip inside a casing. It's securely attached to the fabric, so you never have to worry about it flipping around and moving around, because that can be a little annoying. Okay, so I've got my 4 marks, and as you know, I've talked about it before, we always make sure we never stitch over pins. And so we'll go to the machine, and let me show you how to do this on the serger. I've put my fabric and elastic under the needle and foot, and I've sunk the needle in right at that first quarter mark and removed that first pin. As you know, we don't want to be serging over pins and having any horrible tragedies. I'm going to put my foot down. I like to use that needle kind of like my third hand, as you've heard me say in other tip clips. And now I'm letting the elastic and the raw edge of the fabric ride just to the left of the knife. I don't want to cut it off. And I'm going to begin stitching. And I'm holding, I'm stretching the elastic to that second quarter mark. That's how I know that I'm going to have even gathering all the way around this waistband. So, and I'm going to have to help it along from the back of the foot because I'm pulling forward and the feed dogs need a little help to advance it. So I'm going to just start stitching along, 3-thread overlock. You can use a 4-thread if you prefer, but I've got a 3-thread on for right now. Just taking my time, make sure that elastic and the raw edge are nicely aligned with each other. And I'm pulling it right to that second pin, the second quarter mark. And as I approach, I am going to remove that pin and advance my fingers to the next quarter mark and just continue along. And I'm skimming off those whiskers, those little stray threads at the edge, but I'm trying not to trim away the fabric and definitely trying not to nick the elastic. Taking out the next pin and advancing my finger to that next quarter mark. As I said, it's the same technique that you're doing at your sewing machine. Keep your fingers out of the way of the blade too. You don't want to nick those either. You might need them. I'm going to trim off this little tail of thread and just overlap a few stitches. And I'm good. I'm going to raise my foot, just pivot off, clip my threads, and there we have it. Very, very nicely, evenly adjusted all the way around, and you've got a finished edge. Now, the elastic has been serged to the raw edge of the skirt or pant top. And so this step is a sewing machine step where you're just going to go to your sewing machine and use either the serpentine stitch or the stretch straight stitch, that's hard to say, and you're going to flip the fabric over to create a casing so that the elastic is concealed, holding it taut. Don't overstretch your fabric, especially if you're working with a knit. It's not as easy to do with a woven, but you're going to hold it straight and just stitch right along through here, and then this is exactly what you'll end up with. And you've got a nice little encased elastic, nice and smooth, very secure. Then the last step would be from pulling on the elastic so hard, either through the elastic foot or manually, whichever technique that you're doing, you're going to want to really give that elastic a good steaming to let it recover back to its original dimension and the one that you wanted. So that is the finishing touch on that, is to give it a very, very good steaming all the way around. And you'll see that elastic dimension shrink back to its original size. This is done with the stretch straight stitch, which is like a very tiny little zigzag. There's lots of stretch in it. And that's a great stitch to use if you've got knits too. Or another choice might be, if you have it on your machine, a serpentine stitch, just like this. And again, plenty of stretch on that as well. And it's kind of pretty too. Okay, so we've seen two different options for attaching elastic. The previous tip clip was using the elastic foot, and today we use the quartering method. There is one other option available. Both tip clips had the stitch as an overlock stitch, but if you have cover stitch capability, that's one more way of attaching elastic, and the principles all apply pretty much the same. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.